All right, 49ers faithful. Let's jump into this because the draft is coming fast and the conversation is already heating up. You've got the 27th overall pick, and that question keeps circling back. What position do you take? Now, I know there's always going to be a group that screams best player available, and I get it. BPA is a solid approach, but I don't always buy into it as a rigid rule. I'm more of a BPA plus strategy guy. I like to look at the board, evaluate value, and also weigh positional needs and unique talent that might not be available later. Because let's be real, there are certain freak athletes you don't get a second chance at, especially in the first round. So yes, you can argue they're the best available, but sometimes the decision is about more than just a name on a list. The first-round pick at 27 always triggers a debate, and I want to hear what you think. Some fans will say, go offensive tackle, no matter what, and I respect that. Protecting the quarterback is never a bad idea, and if there's a monster tackle on the board, you can make a strong case for it. Then there's the other side, the edge rushers, the elite athletes that can change a defense in a single season. If you're looking at the draft board and see an edge talent that makes your eyes pop, you can argue you can't pass on that. I understand both perspectives, and that's why this is such a fascinating discussion. Now, let's talk about something that might divide the fan base even more, a skill position in the first round. If the Niners go wide receiver at 27, some people will be thrilled, others will lose their minds. The idea of drafting a receiver like a Matthew Golden type or a Ricky Pearsall-like prospect is intriguing because it speaks directly to Kyle Shanahan's offense. Shanahan loves dynamic receiving options, and adding a weapon that can stretch the field or create mismatches is always tempting. But at the same time, some fans will look at that pick and say, why are we spending a first-round pick on a position we can address later? That's why this conversation matters. The 49ers are not a team that can afford to waste opportunities, and they have holes to fill. The offense is stacked with talent, but the defense needs reinforcements, and the offensive line still has questions. So the decision at 27 becomes a balancing act between what the team needs and what the team can't afford to miss. Now, here's where things get interesting. Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft has the Niners selecting Kenyon Suttie out of Oregon. And I'm going to say this, that pick actually makes a lot of sense. Not because I'm saying the Niners need a tight end, but because the player fits the system in a way that few players do. Jeremiah is one of those analysts people watch closely, not because he's always right, but because he understands draft value and range. You watch his mock drafts change after the Senior Bowl, after the Combine, and you start to see the way the draft is being shaped. Kenyon Suttie being the first tight end off the board in Jeremiah's mock is notable. He's undersized, but he has outstanding speed and is a competitive blocker. That combination is rare. When you watch his tape, he doesn't look like a guy who just runs straight ahead. He looks like he moves faster than he's actually running, like he's got that sneaky quickness. And that's the kind of athletic profile that can be a nightmare for defenses, especially in Kyle Shanahan's offense. The idea of a tight end who can function like a hybrid of George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk is tantalizing. Shanahan loves chess pieces, players who can line up in multiple spots and create mismatches. And Suttie fits that mold. NFL.com's prospect profile describes him as a versatile tight end with a shredded physique and intriguing potential as a volume target. His route tree is described as full of branches, and that sounds like Shanahan style. A tight end who can get open against man coverage on all three levels, who can make plays after the catch, who can win contested catches, and who can also contribute as a blocker. Those are the traits of a Shanahan weapon. Now, let's be clear, he's not perfect. The scouting report notes that he can occasionally allow balls to hit the ground on lower difficulty plays. That's not a deal breaker, but it's something to watch. And his blocking is described as adequate, with good effort but not elite technique. Still, for a team looking to diversify its passing options with a talented pass-catching tight end, Suttie could become a priority. What makes him intriguing is his versatility. You look at what the Niners have done recently in the first round with tight ends like Brock Bowers and Tyree Wilson, and you think about how those guys were game changers in college. Suttie didn't have the same kind of dominant college profile, but he was productive. He led college football in touchdowns, and he averaged around 12 yards per catch over the last 2 years. That's solid production, and it shows he can be a playmaker. But here's my hesitation. Is that versatility enough to justify a first-round pick? Especially when you consider the talent available on the board. There could be monstrous offensive tackles, elite edge rushers, and other players that can change the identity of the team. The 49ers have needs, particularly on the defensive line and in the pass rush. With Nick Bosa missing significant time, the defense struggled to generate pressure, and that put extra strain on the secondary. The pass rush is not something you can ignore, and you can argue that a first-round pick should be used to build that side of the ball. I also think about last year, when a player like Harold Fanian Jr. was available in the 3rd round, and teams didn't feel the need to spend first-round capital. My concern is that if Suddy's value is mostly his versatility, you have to ask whether that's worth taking him at 27 when you could potentially get a similar type of player later. If you can find a utility man in the 2nd round, why pay the premium in the 1st? That said, if the Niners do end up taking Suddy, I wouldn't be upset. I actually think there's a lot of upside to the pick. He's the kind of player who could add youth to the receiving game, and he could eventually replace aging veterans like Kyle Juszczyk or even George Kittle down the line. That kind of long-term planning matters. So I'm not sold yet, but I'm intrigued. I need to see more. I need to see who will be available at 27 and what the board looks like after the combine. But the possibility of adding a versatile tight end who can do multiple things in Shanahan's system is hard to ignore. Now, let's shift gears for a moment because there's another storyline that has people talking: Dre Greenlaw and the way coaches practice. Dre Greenlaw, now with the Broncos, talked about the transition and described Sean Payton's style as old school. He mentioned that Payton's practice schedule includes 6 days on and 1 day off, with 3-hour sessions on Wednesdays and Fridays. And he contrasted that with Shanahan's approach, which is the complete opposite. I'm bringing this up because there are people who have been looking for explanations for the injury issues the 49ers have faced. Some fans have pointed to external theories, but I think one thing we can't ignore is practice methodology. How coaches structure practice, how much contact is allowed, how much intensity is expected. These things absolutely impact player health. There's an old school mentality that says you practice hard, you hit hard, you get pads on, and you build toughness through physicality. Then there's the newer approach that prioritizes player health and tries to limit contact to reduce injury risk. Both philosophies have costs and benefits, and there isn't a single correct answer. But here's my concern. If Greenlaw's comments are accurate, and if the way Shanahan runs practices is part of the reason for the injury problems, then changing trainers might not fix the issue. The problem might be deeper than that. Greenlaw was one of the toughest players on the team, and his perspective matters. He's not saying this to be dramatic. He's describing a real difference in practice culture. If the 49ers are dealing with injuries because the practice environment is too intense or too demanding, then we need to look at the coaching philosophy. The team has already faced significant injuries, including losing Fred Warner, one of the toughest players in the league. If you remove a player like Warner, the defense becomes vulnerable, and the secondary looks worse because there's less support behind them. So the question is, what's causing these injuries? Is it bad luck, or is it something structural? And if it is structural, is it something that a new trainer can fix? John Lynch has said everything is on the table, and that's reassuring because it means the organization is at least willing to examine the issue. But the solution might require more than just a change in staff. Now, continuing from that point, let's dig deeper into what this all means for the 49ers moving forward, especially when we talk about the draft, the team's identity, and how the coaching staff handles the day-to-day grind. The draft is not just about picking the best player or filling the biggest hole. It's also about building a roster that can withstand the wear and tear of an NFL season. And that starts with how you structure your team and how you manage the players. The 49ers have been through a lot in the last couple of seasons, and the injuries have forced them to adapt, but there's only so much adaptation you can do before you have to address the root cause. If we're being honest, the Niners have been fortunate in some ways. They have a strong core of players and a coaching staff that can adjust on the fly. But when you start losing key players like Fred Warner, you see how fragile the structure can be. Warner was not just a player. He was the glue. He covered for mistakes, he filled gaps, and he made the defense look better than it sometimes was. When he went down, the defense didn't just lose a player. It lost an entire system of support. That's why the injuries are so significant. It's not just about the talent level. It's about how the team functions when the pieces are missing. That brings us back to the draft and why the 27th pick matters so much. If you're selecting a tight end like Kenyon Suddy, you're thinking about versatility and creating more offensive options. You're thinking about adding a chess piece that can line up in multiple positions, create mismatches, and give the offense a new dimension. But if you're selecting a defensive player, especially an edge rusher or a defensive tackle, you're thinking about the foundation. You're thinking about building the kind of defense that can dominate even when the secondary is under pressure. This is where the argument becomes complex. The 49ers have always been a team that values the trenches. They build from the inside out, and they understand that games are won at the line of scrimmage. So when you talk about drafting a tight end in the first round, some people will say it's a luxury pick. They'll say it's a move that doesn't address the real issues. And I can see that perspective. But I also see the other side. The 49ers are a team that thrives on creativity and deception. They love players who can do multiple things and keep defenses guessing. If Kenyon Suddy can truly be a hybrid weapon, then he could be the kind of player that elevates the entire offense. The real question is whether he is a first-round talent. That's the debate. Because you can find versatile tight ends later in the draft, but the elite ones are rare. If you can get a player who can change the game at the tight end position, it might be worth the investment. But if the player is just good and not great, then you have to ask whether the team should use that pick on a more impactful position. Let's talk about the 49ers' offensive identity for a second. Kyle Shanahan is one of the best offensive minds in the league, and he's built a system that thrives on playmakers who can create after the catch. The tight end position is crucial in his scheme because it allows him to manipulate coverage and create favorable matchups. If you have a tight end who can run routes like a receiver and block like a lineman, you have a weapon that could do a little bit of everything. That's why the idea of a hybrid tight end is so appealing. But you also have to consider the cost. First-round picks are precious. They're not just about the player. They're about the opportunity cost. If you use a first-round pick on a tight end, you're passing on a potential star edge rusher or a dominant tackle. Those players can change the identity of your team. And the 49ers have shown they are not afraid to invest in the defensive line. They understand the value of pressure and disruption. That's why you can't ignore the defensive side of the draft. And that brings us to the point about the defensive line and the pass rush. The 49ers have always been built on a strong front, but last year they struggled. The pass rush wasn't what it needed to be, and that forced the secondary into difficult situations. The secondary did its best, but without pressure, the defense becomes vulnerable. That's why adding to the defensive line is so important. You can talk about drafting a receiver or a tight end, but if you don't have a pass rush, you're going to be in trouble in big games. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to 49ers Zone and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the San Francisco 49ers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. In a move that has sent shockwaves through the NFL rumor mill, whispers are circulating that the San Francisco 49ers are eyeing none other than Austin Ekeler to completely redefine their backfield. Known for his dual-threat capability as both a dynamic rusher and a reliable receiving option out of the backfield, Ekeler's potential arrival in San Francisco could signal a seismic shift in how the 49ers plan to attack defenses in the coming seasons. Sources close to the situation suggest that San Francisco's offensive architects are envisioning Ekeler as the centerpiece of a high-octane, unpredictable running game. With his quick change of direction, exceptional vision, and uncanny ability to find seams in even the most disciplined defenses, Ekeler could bring a level of versatility that the 49ers haven't seen in years. The speculation is that head coach Kyle Shanahan, already celebrated for his creative run schemes, would have an arsenal of plays tailor-made to exploit Ekeler's unique skill set, potentially opening lanes for both deep passes and outside runs. Analysts have begun to imagine scenarios where Ekeler could complement the 49ers' existing backfield weapons, creating a hybrid attack that keeps linebackers and safeties guessing on every snap. His presence could allow San Francisco to balance power running with finesse, stretching defenses horizontally and vertically, while keeping the quarterback in favorable matchups. Some insiders even suggest that EKELER's work ethic and football IQ could make him a locker room catalyst, bringing a level of energy and precision that elevates the entire offense. Of course, the speculation raises questions. How would EKELER adapt to the West Coast? Can the 49ers' offensive line consistently create the gaps he needs to shine? And with his heavy usage in prior systems, what measures would the coaching staff take to maximize his impact while preserving his durability? Fans and pundits alike are buzzing, drawing comparisons to past NFL duos that changed the trajectory of a franchise. If these rumors hold any truth, San Francisco might be on the verge of a bold gamble, one that could reshape their backfield dynamics and potentially make the 49ers' offense one of the most feared units in the league. As the rumor mill churns, one thing is clear. The mere thought of Austin Ekeler in scarlet and gold has ignited imaginations across the NFL, leaving fans eager to see if this speculative blockbuster could become reality. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the San Francisco 49ers, make sure to subscribe to 49ers Zone and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.